A very good morning, students. Today we are going to do the second part of the lesson Lost Spring, where the author Anis Jung talks about those child laborers who worked as bangle makers in Firozabad. And these children are burdened with stigma of caste. I want to drive a car. Mukesh insists on being his own master. I'll be a motor mechanic, he announces. Do you know anything about cars? I ask. I will learn to drive a car, he answers, looking straight into my eyes. His dreams looms like a mirage amidst the dust of streets that fill his town Firozabad, famous for its bangles. Every other family in Firozabad is engaged in making bangles. It is the center of India's glass blowing industry, where families have spent generations working around furnaces, welding glass, making bangles for all the women in the land, it seems. Here, the author meets one of the child laborer named Mukesh, who lives in Firozabad. When the author asks him what he would like to become, he says that he would become a motor mechanic. The author asked him if he knew anything about the cars. To her question, Mukesh replies, I will learn to drive a car. And while answering this, he looked confident. He looked straight into the eyes of the author. The author feels that his dream of becoming a motor mechanic, that is like a mirage amidst the dust of street that fills his town Firozabad. Because Firozabad was famous for its bangles. Every family in the Firozabad is engaged in making bangles. They make bangles. And Firozabad is the center of India's glass blowing industries, where families have spent generations. Like from their generations, they are working around furnaces, welding glass, and making bangles for all the women in the land, it seems. Mukesh family is among them. None of them know that it is illegal for children like him to work in the glass furnaces with high temperatures, in diggy cells, without air and light, that the law, if enforced, could get him and all those 20,000 children out of hot furnaces where they slog their daylight hours, often losing the brightness of their eyes. Mukesh's eyes beam as he volunteers to take me home, which he proudly says is being rebuilt. Now, as I told you, that all the families in Firozabad, they are engaged in making bangles. So Mukesh's family is also one of them. None of the people who are involved in this profession, they know that it is illegal for children to work as child laborers in the atmosphere like high temperature in dingy cells without air and light. And this is illegal, and if they can complain, that could get them, that could get Mukesh and all those 20,000 children out of the hot furnaces. Now those 20,000 children, they are working as child laborers. It is illegal for them. And if somebody complains, the law can bring them out, of that atmosphere where they spend their daylight hours, and by the time they become young, they lose the brightness of their eyes. And the author one day wants Mukesh to take her to his home. So he feels very happy. And he tells that his house was being rebuilt. There was some renovation in his house. We walked down stinking lanes choked with garbage, past homes that remained hovels with crumbling walls, wobbly doors, no windows, crowded with families of human and animals, coexisting in a primeval state. He stops at the door of one such house, bangs a wobbly iron door with his foot and pushes it open. When the author goes with him to his house, so you can just imagine all this. The street where Mukesh lives, those were the stinking lanes. Everywhere there was garbage, heaps of garbage. There were hovels. Hovels means small homes, like with crumbling walls, wobbly doors. There were no windows. and families of human and animals. That means both lived at the same place. The humans also and the animals also. And while going through the street, he stops at the door of one such house and he bangs the door with his foot and the door gets open. We enter a half-built shack. In one part of it, thatched with dead grass, is a firewood stove over which sits a large vessel of sizzling spinach leaves. On the ground, in large aluminium platters, are more chopped vegetables. A frail young woman is cooking the evening meal for the whole family. Through the eyes filled with smoke, she smiles. She is the wife of Mukesh's elder brother. Not much older in years, she has begun to command respect as the Bahu, the daughter-in-law of the house, already in charge of 3 men, her husband, Mukesh, and their father. When the older man enters, she gently withdraws behind the broken wall and brings her veil closer to her face. Now, when author and Mukesh reaches home, what she saw inside the house, that there was a firewood stove over which, some spinach leaves, they were boiling. On the ground, aluminium platters were there on which more chopped vegetables were kept. A frail young woman. Frail means a very thin young woman, young in age. She's cooking the food for the, family, evening meal, and she smiles at the author. Who is she? She is the wife of Mukesh's elder brother. That means Mukesh's sister-in-law. She is also not very much older in years, almost the same age as of Mukesh. But, since she is married, she is having respect as the Bahu because she is the daughter-in-law of the house. And she is taking charge of 3 men. Which 3 men in the family? Her husband, which was Mukesh's elder brother, then Mukesh and their father. When the older man enters, who is older man? Mukesh's father. When he enters the house, she, puts a veil close to her face. That means she follows the custom and tradition of the family by, giving respect to the elder by, putting a veil, घूंघट कर लेना, close to her face. As custom demands, daughter-in-law must veil their faces before male elders. So, I told you that she follows the custom and traditions. In this case, the elder is an impoverished bangle maker. Despite long years of hard labor, first as a tailor, then a bangle maker, he has failed to renovate a house, send his 2 sons to school. All he has managed to do is teach them what he knows, the art of making bangles. Now here, first we talked about the Mukesh's sister-in-law and now his father. So, father, who is the head? The father is the head of the family. He is an impoverished bangle maker. Earlier, he worked as a tailor. So, he had 2 professions. First, he worked as a tailor, then as a bangle maker. But throughout the hard work in his life, he has not been able to achieve much in his life. How? Because he has failed to renovate a house and he could not educate his 2 sons. 2 sons means Mukesh and his brother. He could not, afford to renovate a house and educate his 2 sons. All what he has been able to manage to teach them the art of bangle making, which he knows himself. It is his karam, his destiny, says Mukesh's grandmother, who has watched her own husband go blind with the dust storm polishing the glass of bangles. Can a God-given lineage ever be broken? She implies. Being in the caste of bangle makers, they have seen nothing but bangles. In the house, in the yard, every other house, every other yard, every street in Firozabad. Spiral of bangles, sunny, gold, paddy green, royal blue, pink, purple, every color born out of the 7 colors of the rainbow. Lie in mounds in unkept yards, are piled on 4-wheeled carts, pushed by the young men along with the narrow lanes of the shanty town. So, there's an elderly lady in the house and she is Mukesh's grandmother. Her views regarding this are, she says, it is his karam, his destiny, to be born in the family of bangle makers. She says, can a God-given lineage ever be broken? That means, God has given them birth in this caste, in the family of Bengal makers. So they cannot break that God-given lineage. Means they cannot come out of this. They have to be Bengal makers throughout their lives, she implies. So, since they were born in the caste of Bengal makers, so throughout their life, they have seen nothing but Bengals, different colors of Bengals. So, spiral of Bengals, sunny, gold, pedigree, different colors. These Bengals are, lying in large number in unkempt yards. So they are pushed by the, young men in the four-wheeled handcarts and taken to the town to sell them off. And in dark hutments, next to lines of flames of flickering oil lamps, sit boys and girls with their fathers and mothers, welding pieces of colored glass into circle of Bengals. As I told you, they cannot break this God-given lineage. So the whole family is involved in this. The little children, they are sitting with their fathers and mothers in the, flickering oil lamps, making the, different colored bangles. Their eyes are more adjusted to the dark than to the light outside. That is why they often end up losing their eyesight before they become adults. So now I told you, since, the atmosphere was not so good. So what used to happen? They adjusted to the dark than to the light outside. They, sit on those little hutments, making those bangles. So before they grew up, they used to lose their eyesight. Savita, a young girl in a drab pink dress, sits alongside an elderly woman, soldering pieces of glass. As her hand moves mechanically, like the tongs of a machine, I wonder if she knows the sanctity of the bangle she helps make. It symbolizes an Indian woman's suhag, auspiciousness in marriage. It will dawn on her suddenly one day when her head is draped with a red veil, her hands tied red with henna, and red bangles rolled into her wrists. She will then become a bride, like the old women beside her who became one many years ago. She still has bangles on her wrist, but no light in her eyes. So here the author talks about another child laborer, a girl whose name is Savita. She's wearing pink dress and she's sitting with an elderly woman making bangles. Her hands, she makes them so fast that her hands look like the tongs of a machine. The author wonders, thinks that does this girl know about the sensitivity of the bangles? Because these bangles, these green bangles, different colored bangles, they are the symbol of Indian women's suhag. You can see, Indian women wearing, bangles on their wrist. So one day, this girl, Savita, she will also get married. Her head will be draped with a red veil. She will have henna in her hands. She will then become a bride. But the author wonders, she will have bangles on her wrist, but no light in her eyes. Like, would this happen with Savita also? What would happen? That she would become a bride, but by that time, she would lose her eyesight the way the old women beside her, who was sitting beside her, she had become bride many years ago. She still has bangles on her wrist, but no light in her eyes. So the author here wonders about the future of Savita. Would it be the same like the old lady who was sitting beside her? That bangles on the wrist, but no eyesight in the eyes. एक वक्त शेर भर खाना भी नहीं खाया, she says in a voice drained of joy. She has not enjoyed even one full meal in her entire lifetime. That's what she has reaped. Her husband, an old man with a flowing beard, says, I know nothing except bangles. All I have done is make a house for the family to live in. So this lady, who was sitting beside Savita, when the author talks to her, she replies that she did not have even one full meal in her entire lifetime. They could not afford that much. That they could, had proper meal also. Her husband, who was an old man, he says that he knows nothing but to make bangles, and only one thing he has done. What he has done? That he has been able to make a house for the family to live in. Hearing him, one wonders if he has achieved what many have failed in their lifetime. So the author feels that if this fellow who has made a house, is that an achievement in his life which others have not been able to do? What achievement? He has a roof over his head. The cry of not having money to do anything except carry on the business of making bangles, not even enough to eat, rings in every home. So this is the condition of every home in Firozabad, that they have just carried on the business of making bangles, carried on the business of their generations, of their elders, but they have not earned enough to eat. So this is the condition of every home. The young men echo the lament of the elders. Little has moved with time. It seems in Firozabad, years of mind-numbing toil have killed all initiative and the ability to dream. So this work, this hard work, they have killed all the initiative. Means nobody is ready to take the initiative to dream, to become something else. The young men, they carry on the business of their elders. So the author asks them, why not organize yourself into a cooperative? I ask a group of young men who have fallen into the vicious circle of middlemen who trapped their fathers and forefathers. So when the author asked those young men, why you don't organize yourself into a cooperative? Because their fathers and forefathers were trapped by the middlemen. So what they reply? They say, even if we get organized, we are the ones who will be hauled by the police, beaten and dragged to jail for doing something illegal. They say, there is no leader among them, no one who could help them see things differently. Their fathers are as tired as they are. They talk endlessly in a spiral that moves from poverty to apathy, to greed and to injustice. Listening to them, I see two distinct worlds. One of the family, caught in a web of poverty, burdened. So, when she asked the youngsters why they do not organize themselves into a cooperative, they reply that this is considered illegal. Because if they ever try to do so, they are the one who are dragged to jail and beaten by the police officials. Second thing, there is no leader among them. There is no one who could take the initiative, because who could help them to see the things differently, to opt some other profession. No one is there, because their fathers were as tired as they are. So since they are following their fathers and forefathers, so they are also having the same condition. The things have not changed with time. So listening to them means listening to the views of those youngsters. The author sees two distinct worlds in Firozabad. First world was of the family who was caught in the web of poverty, burdened by the stigma of caste in which they are born. So the first world is the family of the bangle makers, poor family bangle makers, and the other, a vicious circle of the sahukar, the middlemen, the policemen, the keepers of law, the bureaucrats, and the politicians. So this is the second world. Sahukar means the people who lend money on interest, Then the middlemen, the policemen, the keepers of the law, the bureaucrats, and the politicians. Together these people, the people of second world, together they have imposed the baggage on the child that he cannot put down. Before he is aware, he accepts it as naturally as his father. So he also takes things, with the time. So the things which are imposed on him, he accepts it as his destiny. To do anything else would mean to dare, and dare is not part of his growing up. So these children, they do not dream of becoming anything else. Why? Because they do not have, dare to become something else. That is not part of their growing up. The things have been followed as their fathers and forefathers. When I sense a flash of it in Mukesh, I am cheered. I want to be a motor mechanic. So, Mukesh, he is a rebel. He is different from others. So, when the author sees a flash of it in Mukesh, why? Because when he says, I want to be a motor mechanic, he repeats. He will go to the garage and learn. When author asked him that, do you know anything about the cars? What he replied, he said he will go to a garage and learn. Then the author says, but the garage is a long way from his home. I will walk, he insists. So he is so determined to become a motor mechanic that he says that even he has to cross a long distance through walking from his home, he would do it. Do you also dream of flying a plane? So again, the author asks a different question from Mukesh. The way, she had asked Sahib. Do you also dream of flying a plane? So then he suddenly becomes silent. No, he says, staring at the ground. In a small murmur, there is an embarrassment that has not turned into regret. He is content to dream of cars that he sees hurtling down the street of his town. Few aeroplanes fly over Firozabad. So when the author asked him if he would dream of flying a plane, he says no. Why? Because he is happy, he is content of, having dreams of cars, of becoming a motor mechanic. And moreover, the second reason is very few aeroplanes fly over Firozabad. So this part is all about Mukesh and his family, about all those child laborers who are involved in the business of bangle making in Firozabad. The atmosphere there is not so good. By the time they grow up, they become, blind. They don't have eyesight. The author feels that it is illegal that these children are involved in bangle making at such an age. And if the law wants, these children, 20,000 children, can be brought out of that. The author sees the people in Firozabad, they do not dare to become something else. And when she sees a spark in Mukesh, she feels happy about it. So I hope you must have understood this lesson. And the theme of the lesson is child labor. So that's all for today.